Welcome to Greywater Reach, where the line between reality and nightmare blurs with every breath. What secret does the humming town hide, and can anyone leave unscathed? Stay tuned as the chilling truth unfolds. Part 1. Arrival in Greywater Reach. I first saw Greywater Reach through a cracked windshield. Rain traced veins down the glass as I crept over the last hill, headlights sweeping across a quiet town nestled between black woods and mist-drenched marsh. It wasn't on my GPS. No cell service. Just the old map in my glove box, marked with a red circle and the word, Origin. The road narrowed as I descended. Trees leaned too close, and the mist thickened until the world outside my car looked like wet cotton. I nearly missed the town sign. Wood, rotted, scrawled in hand-painted white. Welcome to Greywater Reach. We keep the song. A strange phrase, but I figured it was a local motto or something quaint. The air felt synchronized. As I rolled into town, I noticed it almost instantly. People walking the sidewalks, slowly, in step, every footfall a whispering echo of the one before it. Doors opened as if on cue, some in perfect rhythm with others closing. It was like a puppet show choreographed by something unseen. The gas station attendant didn't speak when I asked where I could stay. He just pointed down the street. A woman sweeping her porch paused mid-sweep to stare at me, her eyes distant, humming something under her breath. It wasn't just her. The same humming seeped through the open windows of every home I passed. It was a lullaby with no words, just melody, over and over again. I found the boarding house easily. It was the only building with the lights flickering, in Morse. At least that's how it looked. Inside, the smell was a mix of lavender and mildew. The innkeeper was already standing at the front desk when I walked in. She smiled, but her eyes didn't match the smile. "You came for the record," she said. I blinked. "Excuse me?" She didn't repeat it. She just handed me a key and nodded toward the staircase. Room 3A. The room was plain, too plain. A bed, a window that wouldn't open, and a nightstand with a Bible. Only, when I opened it, it wasn't the Bible. The pages were blank. All except the last one, where a line had been handwritten. "Do not sing the hills awake." I barely slept. Something about this town felt watched. Not by people, but by something woven into the wood, into the soil. The walls of my room creaked in sync with the wind. No, with breath. Like the whole building was inhaling with me. The next morning, I walked to the church. Every town has one, right? Greywater Reach did, but theirs was unlike any I'd seen. No stained glass, no cross. The steeple wasn't pointed toward the sky. It curved downward, like a hook ready to pull something out of the earth. Its doors were shut tight, sealed with rusted chains. Yet I heard music from inside. That same lullaby, only slower, heavier, and far too many voices singing it. A child sat on the steps, pale, barefoot, staring straight ahead. She didn't flinch when I approached, just held out a folded piece of paper like she'd been waiting to give it to me. I opened it, a drawing, in crayon. It showed the town, the buildings drawn in clumsy squares. But in the center, the church, bigger than all the rest, with arms, yes, arms, stretching from it into every house. Arms made of roots, wrapped around tiny stick figures inside the homes. Above it, a shape, eyeless, limbless, just a mass of mouths. The caption read, "Our God. He hears us through the dirt." I looked up, but the child was gone. I tried to ask around. The butcher, the barber, a man tending to a gravestone in the overgrown cemetery. But every question I asked, about the church, about the drawing, was met with the same response. "We keep the song." That phrase again. That afternoon, I found the library. Dusty, but intact. The librarian wore a blindfold. She didn't acknowledge me, not even when I dropped a stack of books trying to navigate the history section. Nothing recent. Every town record stopped around 1912. I found a journal tucked behind the tax ledgers, leather-bound and soft with age. It belonged to someone named Ellis Rourke, dated 1908. Most entries were mundane: weather, crops, births. Then one line stood out. "The song is changing. It's learning our rhythm. We should have prayed louder to the right God." I flipped through more pages, ink blotted, words scratched out and overwritten. The church was not built by our hands. It was waiting. We didn't sing it into being. We heard its lullaby and built around it. The final page was torn out. A scrap remained, just a corner. The words still legible. "Stop singing. It can't wake if no one sings." I left the library shaken. My ears rang with that same damn tune. I started to wonder, was the town humming or was it something deeper? The ground itself? As I passed the bakery, I saw something strange. Flour on the windowsill, and small, bare footprints, leading up the glass. Not to it. Up it, as if a child had walked vertically into the sky. That night, I dreamed I was standing inside the church, but the walls pulsed. The floor throbbed like a heart. I wasn't alone. Faces stitched into the pews, mouths open, singing. Some were singing with no tongues. One of them turned toward me and said, "You're the new voice." I woke up screaming. The innkeeper was waiting outside my door, still smiling. She held a hymn book. Inside it, every page was filled with that same melody. No lyrics, just notes. And beneath them, scribbled instructions. Harmonize with the ground. Do not sing alone. Do not stop once begun. I asked her who wrote it. She tilted her head. "You'll know him when he breathes." I didn't ask what that meant. I didn't want to know. But I did know one thing by then. Greywater Reach didn't worship like other towns. They listened, they harmonized, and they built their homes around something that had never wanted to be found. But it always wanted to be heard. Just before midnight, I stepped outside. The whole town was standing in the streets, silent, eyes closed, arms at their sides. And then, all at once, they opened their mouths and began to sing. But it wasn't a song. It was a summoning. Part 2, the hollow choir. They said it would help me sleep. That's how they invited me to the service. An older woman named Ruth had seen me pacing outside the boarding house the night before, hands shaking, sleep-deprived and wired on too. Many gas station coffees. She had the same dull-eyed calm as the others in Greywater Reach, like someone who'd forgotten how to feel surprise. "You should come to the evening service, dear," she said. "It quiets the mind." The way she said, it made it feel less like a suggestion and more like a treatment plan. I didn't say yes, but I didn't say no either. That evening, when the church bell rang, just once, a low moan through the mist, my feet moved on their own. The church looked different at night. It always looked wrong, with its steeple that curved downward. Like a talon, but under moonlight it felt larger, as though it were unfolding, breathing. I pushed open the doors. Inside, it was cold. Not the kind that bites your skin, the kind that settles in your bones. There were no pews, just concentric circles of stone benches. Dozens of townspeople sat in silence, facing the center, where a single figure stood. The priest. Tall, unmoving, wearing robes the color of dried blood. His face was long, and his skin sagged in ways that defied age. He never opened his eyes. He didn't need to. He raised one hand, and they began to hum. No words, no melody I could recognize. Just this deep, guttural vibration that rolled through, the chamber like thunder crawling beneath the floor. I felt it in my teeth, in my stomach, like I was sitting inside a mouth, listening to it breathe. I tried to leave, but my legs didn't listen. They hummed for a long time. I don't know how long. Time slipped sideways. At some point, the woman next to me, Ruth, tilted her head and smiled. Blood trickled from her left ear. She didn't notice or didn't care. When the priest lowered his hand, the humming stopped. Everyone stood and filed out in complete silence, but no one spoke to each other. No one even looked at each other. I stumbled back to my room, ears still ringing. I should have packed up and left. I should have driven into the trees if I had to. But I didn't. I dreamt of a mouth, the size of the town, opening beneath the church, tongue made of stone, teeth made of homes. I was inside it, humming along with everyone else. But the sound wasn't coming from me. It was coming from the walls. The next day, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was some backwoods cult ritual. Maybe they were just eccentric. Maybe the cold and the exhaustion were messing with me. I told myself all of that while I walked to the town library. Again. This time, I asked the blindfolded librarian if they had hymnals or music archives. She handed me a slim leather-bound book before I could finish the question. It had no title. Inside, musical notations scrawled in thick black ink, no lyrics, just strange marks, a mix of slashes, spirals, and claw-like symbols. Some pages were burned around the edges, others stained with what looked like dried blood. At the back, I found something stranger, a phonetic translation guide. Not in Latin, not even Greek. Something older, something I didn't recognize. But this line chilled me. The words are not meant to be understood, only repeated. The body will learn the tone. The tone will teach the mind. I took the book and left. I shouldn't have. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. Again. That humming, it was still in me. I felt it under my ribs. So I did something stupid. I played the recording. See? I had my phone in my coat during the service. It had been recording. Just a habit, I guess. I hadn't meant to, but the audio was there. An hour-long file titled, simply, Unknown Church Zoa 1. I put in my earbuds, pressed play, static, muffled tones, that same horrible hum. But this time, it sounded more complex, like layers, as if beneath the low drone were other voices, whispering something too fast to catch. So I reversed the audio. I don't know why. But the moment I did, my blood ran cold, because I heard my voice. Not a whisper, not an echo. My voice, clear and calm, praying in a language I didn't know, repeating it, over and over. Azel tir onatha. Azel tir onatha. I stopped the recording, ripped out the earbuds, sat there in the dark, heart pounding, breath held, waiting for something, anything, to move in the room. Nothing did. But I swear, I felt watched. The next morning, I asked Ruth about the priest. She blinked slowly and said, "There is no priest. There is only the echo." When I pressed her, she looked past me and said, "He leads us from within. The choir is his breath. The service is his dream." I asked her what Azel tir onatha meant. She smiled again. That same serene smile. It's not a name. It's a direction. Then she walked away, leaving me standing in the middle of the street while the townsfolk all turned to look at me, just for a second, before continuing their synchronized stroll like nothing had happened. I couldn't stay. I knew that. But that night, I couldn't make myself leave either. I lay in bed, listening to the silence between the creaks of the old boarding house, trying not to think about the way the walls seemed to expand with each breath, trying not to remember that I had prayed to something in a language no one should know. I tried not to hum, but I did. Without realizing it, I found myself humming that same awful tune. The song of Greywater Reach, low and slow. And as I hummed, the house hummed back. The phone buzzes beside Clara on the nightstand. A new recording appears. Unknown, Church LO2, recorded at 2:17 a.m. She hasn't touched her phone. She presses play, and the first voice that speaks is hers, whispering, Azel Tir Onatha. It is listening. Part 3. The Apostle Route. I should have left Greywater Reach the moment I heard the church hum back at me. But I stayed. Curiosity, fear, fascination. Call it what you want. Something had me in its grip. I hadn't unpacked my bags, hadn't eaten more than a protein bar, and still I wandered like someone following an invisible leash. The locals no longer met my eyes. They passed me in perfect synchronicity, stepping to some rhythm I couldn't hear. Yet my body wanted to match their pace. It was like walking upstream in someone else's dream. I spent the morning combing through the town's archives, tucked beneath the schoolhouse. Stone walls, iron shelves, everything damp with, time. Most of the records were predictable. Births, deaths, crop yields, land transfers. But tucked into a broken binder, bound with cloth instead of glue, I found something older. Handwritten, uneven, yellowed by age and smoke. It referred to something called the Apostle Route. That name alone made my hands go cold. The book didn't describe it like architecture, not like a foundation. It was spoken of as alive. Something ancient that feeds the flock and binds the god to soil. The next page was missing, ripped out so violently that I could still see part of the sentence. It must be kept nourished, with song and Shah. That was it. I copied what I could and brought it to the only person in town who still pretended to tolerate me, a schoolteacher named Mara, who spoke like every word was rehearsed. She wouldn't look at the page, wouldn't touch it, just said, "We don't talk about what's beneath," and closed the door in my face. So I found it myself. The churchyard was surrounded by soft, freshly churned soil despite no signs of recent construction. No graves, no markers, just earth that looked unsettled. Behind the main church building, past a tangle of weeds and thorned vines, I found it, a bricked-over tunnel. The stones were old, uneven. They didn't match the rest of the church or the town. There was no plaque, no warning sign, just faint carvings, almost grown over by moss, symbols shaped like mouths, all open wide. I should have walked away. I should have run. But when I pressed my palm to the bricks, I felt heat. So I returned that night, with gloves, a chisel, and just enough recklessness to get me killed. The bricks came loose easier than they should have. Behind them, blackness. A tunnel. I stepped inside, flashlight trembling in my grip. The air changed immediately. Warm, damp, thick with something that felt like breath. Roots hung from the ceiling. Not dry, not dead. Wet, pulsing. They twitched when the beam of my light touched them. And they weren't growing from the ceiling. They were growing into it. The walls weren't stone. Not really. They were smooth, like the inside of a mouth. Farther in, murals lined the walls. Not painted, carved, scratched with nails or claws into the surface. They told a story, crude but unmistakable. A god, all mouths and arms and teeth, lowered into the earth by a crowd, in black robes. Then, people kneeling, people singing, people feeding it. And then, the last panel, blank faces merging with the roots, their eyes closed, mouths still open. I turned away, breath shallow, heart screaming at me to run. That's when I saw it, a stone block, almost like a crude altar, covered in dust, but the name engraved into it was perfectly clear. Clara Rourke, my name. Below it, a date. 896. I stumbled back, flashlight beam jerking. I told myself there must be another Clara, some ancestor, a namesake. But in my bones, I knew better. The date didn't make sense. The town wasn't even founded then. The record said it didn't exist until 1912, and yet my name was here, on a grave that didn't belong in time. I backed out of the tunnel, heart hammering, knees weak. As I reached the exit, the air behind me shifted. A low, deep hum. The same, one from the church, but this time it was coming from the earth itself. I ran. I don't remember getting back to the boarding house. I don't remember falling asleep. But I remember waking up at 3:33 a.m. Sharp. No alarm. No sound, except for the tape recorder I'd left in my bag. It was on. It was playing something. It was me, praying, in a voice I didn't recognize. I shut it off, but the sound didn't stop, because it wasn't coming from the recorder anymore. It was coming from beneath the floorboards. Part 4. The day the sky bled. They say dreams are the brain's way of sorting through memories. But this wasn't memory. This was prophecy. I dreamed of the god again last night. Not like before. Not a blurry glimpse in some half-lit church. Mural, not a whisper from the roots beneath Greywater Reach. This time, it spoke, in a language that didn't belong to the world. A liturgy made of wet wood creaking and blood boiling. I didn't understand the words, but I knew what they meant. I felt the meaning crawl inside my chest like a beetle behind the ribs. It called itself the Sleeper of Burrows. It showed me the sky tearing like skin, flame dripping like rain, and people kneeling with their faces split open from the song they were forced to sing. It said, "When they forget to bow, I will remind them," in ash. When I woke, my pillow was soaked. Not with sweat, with dirt. Rich, black, wet earth. As if I'd been buried face first. The sky outside was the color of old bruises. And somewhere in the hills, I could hear humming again, like always. Except, now I could hum along. I tried to shake it off. Went into town. Asked questions I knew they wouldn't answer. But someone did. An old man sitting on a bench outside the post office. Eyes milky. Fingers missing nails. He said, "You've seen it, haven't you? The god beneath." I didn't nod, didn't blink, just waited. He reached into his coat pocket and handed me something. An old hymnal. But the pages weren't paper. They were thin sheets of bark. And the writing. Not ink. It looked like veins. I flipped to a page marked with a dried flower. The day the sky bled. He told me it happened once, long ago, during the sickness. A plague came to Greywater Reach, a fever that boiled the blood and made the young die screaming in their beds. He said they tried everything. Prayers, fire, quarantine. Nothing worked. So they listened to the humming in the hills and followed it. They found the god beneath, and they made a pact. They would feed it memory and worship. No church, no steeple, just reverence. In return, it would purge the sickness. It worked, but the price was heavier than they understood. The god did not. want sacrifices in the usual sense. It fed on history. It devoured roots. Every few decades, it needed a new voice, a new priest, a new congregation. And you, the old man said, you're dreaming of it now, which means it's almost time. He stood, walked away without another word, and I just sat there, hymnal in hand, watching the townsfolk pass me in synchronized steps like clockwork wound too tight. That night, I listened again to the recordings from the service, slowed them down, reversed them, layered them, and there it was again. My voice, singing a psalm that scraped across my eardrums like rusted nails, and over it all, a whisper, not mine. The roots remember. The soil dreams. When the bell tolls, the pact resumes. I slammed my laptop shut. My hands were shaking. I went to splash water on my face, and in the bathroom mirror, I didn't see my reflection. I saw the church, but not how I remembered it. It was massive, twisted. The steeple bent like a spine, and something pulsed beneath it, like the earth was breathing. I blinked. It was gone. But when I stepped outside, the air was wrong. Still, too still, like everything was holding its breath. Then I heard it. A bell. A deep, mournful toll, low and ancient. It rattled in my bones, but that wasn't possible. I've walked this whole town, every inch. I've been to the church 3 times. There's no bell tower. There's no bell. And yet, it rang. And the moment it did, every door in Greywater Reach opened in unison. Every head turned toward the hills, and every voice began to hum. Low, unified, empty. I backed away, down the street, into the shadows. Because I knew what that bell meant. It was the call to worship. And I wasn't sure if I was a guest or the next offering. Part 5. The blood Sabbath, I don't remember walking to the church. I remember dinner, or I think I do. A warm meal, a strange aftertaste in the bread. The sound of humming outside the window, like bees, but slower, deeper. Then I blinked, and when my eyes opened again, I was underground. The walls were stone, but they breathed. I was lying on cold dirt, damp with something thicker than water. The air was heavy with the scent of iron and mildew. And underneath it, something sweet, sickly sweet, like rotting fruit in a sunless root cellar. Above me, wooden beams twitched like tendons. They weren't holding the church up, they were moving. They say the blood Sabbath comes once a season, when the god must be fed, a memory it hasn't tasted before. And I was that memory. I tried to move, but my limbs were slow. The bread, it was drugged. My arms and legs worked like they'd forgotten how to belong to me. All around me, the townsfolk were gathered, but I didn't see faces. They wore masks, not cloth, not carved, not theatrical. These were pieces of bark, wrapped tight with twine, with jagged yellow teeth stuck into the grain. Some still had sap dripping from the cracks. Others were darker, polished by blood and time. They didn't speak. They just swayed, hummed, waited. Then the priest stepped forward. He wore the largest mask, or so I thought, curved like antlers, wide gaping mouth, too many teeth, all pointing inward. He reached toward me, and I swear, the roots in the walls pulled back to make space. The basement stretched deeper than it should have. Not a cellar, but a cavern, dug by something old and patient. There were people down there, tied to pillars made of braided limbs, eyes white, lips moving but not speaking, whispered into. That's the only way I can describe it. The god, or its voice, spoke into them. Not words, not commands. Something older, something fungal. A sound that nested in your ears and laid eggs behind your eyes. And as it whispered, they began to forget. One man, a grocer I'd met earlier that week, stopped saying his own name halfway through a prayer. He looked confused, then calm. Then his mouth started moving differently, syllables I couldn't replicate if I tried. Then he smiled, and the skin at the corners of his lips cracked. The priest came closer. I could smell him. Not sweat, not incense, moss, wet wood, milk gone, sour. And then he removed his mask, or tried to, but it wasn't a mask. It was his face. And underneath, there was nothing, just hollow, a cavity of knotted root and meat, pulsing like a heart made of timber. And when he spoke, the voice didn't come from his mouth. It came from the walls. It said, "She remembers. She resists. We must rewrite her." I screamed, or tried, but the humming drowned me out. It was louder now, the whole town, 1,000 voices vibrating in harmony, resonating through the floor, the ceiling, me, and beneath it all, something woke up. I felt the earth shift. The roots in the walls twitched like muscles beneath skin, and something massive breathed in the dark, just beneath my feet, waiting. Then, I saw it, a sigil carved into the stone, the same one the child had drawn on my first day in Greywater Reach, the god, mouths all over its body, arms like roots, eyeless. It pulsed, and the blood on the wall began to flow upward, not dripping, ascending, as if gravity had been reversed, as if the god was pulling from below, taking the blood as offering, pulling it into itself. Then the priest leaned in and whispered, "Name yourself." I couldn't, because in that moment, I didn't know it anymore, and the stone beside me began to shape itself into a plaque, my name, my birthday, and today's date. It was a headstone. Mine. That's when I realized, this isn't just worship. This is erasure. Part 6, the God below all gods. You'd think it would be darker at the bottom of everything, but there's a kind of light. Not warm, not natural. A pale, fleshy glow, like phosphorescence on a corpse left too long in the river. I'm beneath the church now, far beneath it, below the stone, below the bones, below God. I don't remember climbing down. One moment, I was staring at the pulpit made of ribs and rotted hymns. The next, I was in the pit. It wasn't carved. It wasn't built. It grew. The walls pulse, almost like lungs, and roots stretch across the ceiling like veins under translucent skin. Each one whispers, not in words, but in knowing. They speak directly to memory, bypassing the ear. And what they tell me is impossible. The God below all gods, the sleeper of burrows, is not dead. It is not dreaming. It is waiting. Buried. Not by accident, but by covenant. Buried because it once walked among us, and the world bent beneath its weight. And now, it wants to walk again. They say madness is like drowning in thought, but this is different. This is being hollowed out. The roots burrow into the folds of my mind, not to control me, but to replace me, to fill me with divine knowledge. And what I've seen the cities it will raise, cathedrals of bone and flesh, not built with hands, but grown like tumors from worship. I've seen the oceans boil with its breath. I've seen faces, mine among them, stretched across the sky like constellations that scream. It wants me to be its voice, its tongue, its prophet. And somehow, I understand it. I feel the sermons rising in my chest. Not words, but truths. There is a choice now. At least, I think there is. Behind me, the stairs still exist, twisted and knotted, but real. They lead up to the church, to the town, to the torch I carried before it was taken from me. If I climb, if I burn the church, maybe I can end this. Maybe. But I've seen the roots. They run deeper than Greywater Reach. They coil beneath mountains and cities and deserts. They drink from forgotten springs and old blood. Burning this place might not stop it, might only wake it faster. Or I take the pulpit. I let the God finish what it started. Let it speak through me. Let the world learn the only prayer that matters. Obey. I feel its will now, like a second heartbeat. It doesn't scream. It doesn't rage. It just waits. Patient. Certain. Because it knows. I'm already kneeling. I try to remember my mother's voice, but it's been overwritten by the hymn. I try to say my name, but it comes out backwards. I try to scream, but all I do is hum. The steeple above begins to glow, not from sunlight. There is none. From me. The God is rising. The choir has assembled, and I am ready. I walk to the pulpit made of bone and bark. The townsfolk are waiting. Their mouths are open. The air tastes like ash and blood. I place my hands on the scripture, though no. Words are written. The voice enters me. Not like a possession, like a homecoming, and I speak. Clara, let us pray. Thank you for journeying with us into the eerie depths of Greywater Reach. If you felt the chills and enjoyed the thrill, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that keep you on the edge of your seat. Until next time, stay curious and stay safe.